Well, welcome everyone. This is the first episode of Stump the DPE. My name is Jim Pittman. I will be your host, and co-host today is Carl Hancock.
Hi there.
And hello, Carl. None other than the Carl Hancock from FlywithJim.com. So how do I have to switch over to your picture?
I have no idea.
Let's see if we can figure this out together. So if I unpin me, there's Carl. How can people find you on the web, Carl? Where's the best place to go?
Just about anywhere at Fly with the Guys. So youtube.com/Fly with the Guys, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm everywhere at Fly with the Guys.
All right, awesome. So Carl has volunteered to help host this event today and help keep me on track. This is a non-sponsored event. We're just doing this because we wanted to talk airplanes with some of our friends, and but putting in a plug for Carl. I may mention some other resources as we go, just so you know, all these are just things that I believe in, that I recommend. So with that, I do want to make this interactive and take questions. So let's use the chat feature. If you look down in your Zoom app or website, whatever you're using, you should have a control bar. And if you click on chat, you can go ahead and submit questions that way. And Carl's going to help me look for questions to answer. So let's go ahead and get that started. If you have a question about anything, really. And there you go. Carl can see the, make sure you pin yourself back. Thanks. I will do that. There we go. That way it makes it focus on me, apparently. So a little bit of introduction. We can talk about whatever you guys want. There's really no script here. I want to have fun with this. That's the main goal. Talk airplanes, like I said. I do want to give the disclaimer that as a designated pilot examiner and flight instructor, I need to be careful what I say, how I say it. Remember that I am a representative of the FAA, so I want to keep things as factual as possible. Along with that, I want to help everyone to learn the official references from the FAA, how to use the ACS, and keep things official. Along the way, I will share my own opinions, and I will try to remember to let you know when I'm sharing my opinion about a technique or something like that. And why am I seeing a white square now? You still with me, Carl?
Yeah, you clicked something.
I didn't think I clicked something. So let me, doesn't show that I'm sharing anything. Someone else is sharing.
Robert did that.
Robert's still playing with his app. That's okay. So let me come back to here. So you should be seeing my desktop now.
There you go.
All right. So let me go to participants real quick, and I bet there's a setting.
All the nuances of doing this for the first time.
Yeah, that's okay. All right, so don't share your screen. I'll play with that setting more later. I'll figure out where that's hiding. I don't see it on the immediate controls. So anyway, like everything in aviation, there's a lot of room for interpretation and what the things we're going to talk about. So again, I'll try to provide official references and let you know when I'm just sharing something that's my opinion. With that being said, one of the biggest challenges that we have really in life is that we don't know what we don't know. And I know in my own pilot training, that always came to light, usually when I went on a check ride and I studied like crazy and I felt like I knew so much. And then I went to the check ride, and even when I passed the first time, I was always extremely humbled to realize how much I did not know. And before I walked into that check ride, I did not know what I did not know. So hopefully these episodes, these events that we're doing, will help solve that and help you look at some things in a different way, maybe know something that you did not know. So do we have any questions coming in yet, Carl?
No one's using the group chat, which is a great place to go ahead and put your questions.
Absolutely. Well, I know from the discussion that we had on Greg's site that a few people had mentioned weather. So I did prepare a few things to start talking about weather. So while you guys are thinking about it, I'm going to go ahead and just jump into a few random things that I've been thinking about. Greg, just to make sure it's working, or Bob, or both, go ahead and just say hello to Carl in the chat. Let's make sure that that's working. And I see, well, something just blinked, says chat, so that must be working there. How do I get back? I'm just going to let you keep an eye on that, Carl.
Okay.
All right, so from here, let me go ahead and pull up. One of the things that I've noticed there's a lot of misunderstanding on is some of the basics of weather is high and low pressure systems and why they rotate the way they do, the rising air, descending air, all that kind of stuff. And like most things with weather, there's a lot of different pieces to the equation and a lot of different things that you need to understand for it all to make sense. So I'm just gonna try to keep this focused and very basic. But one of the things that I like to teach is to think of the atmosphere like water, because really it is a fluid. Air is a fluid, just like water is a fluid. Of course, it's not as dense as water, but if you imagine that, and you guys see this picture, right, Carl?
Yes.
All right, so here's a picture of the ocean on a relatively calm day. And you know, just to have it ready, let me go ahead and go to aviationweather.gov, which is a website that hopefully you're familiar with. Great place to get official weather information. And I want the surface analysis chart. And it's kind of confusing how they do this because the surface analysis chart is a report, which means it's from the past. But in the menu system, you have to hover over forecast and go to prog charts. At least this is one way to find it. And then SFC for surface. And the first one that comes up is the surface analysis chart, which again is a report. This is something from the past. But then when you go forward, then it does the prog charts, which are the forecasts. So here on the surface analysis chart, looks like it's mostly a beautiful day in the country today. Got something interesting going on here with a low right in the middle of the country. Got the blue line here is a cold front, warm front, where the cold front rear ends the warm front. We've got a little occluded front starting, so that's kind of interesting. Gives us something good to talk about.
Hey,
so
Jim,
what are these H's? Yes, sir.
There's a question actually about that already.
Go for it.
Bristow's asking, you see the blue and red lines there. They have the line, or some of them are broken lines, like the red ones going up through Canada. Sometimes those are in blue as well. What's the difference between the blue dashed lines and the spikes?
So let me zoom in a little bit here. I do not see blue dash lines. Is he talking about, you know, let's just unmute Bristow. There you are, Bristow. We can hear you now. So are you referring about the dash line here? It's kind of an orangish brown color on my screen.
No, in the cold fronts, we always see cold fronts as a solid blue line with blue spikes where you're highlighting. And then down here in the northern and west, it's a broken blue.
Yeah. I don't know that that means anything. I didn't even notice that.
Stump you.
Well, I think it's just the graphic.
I saw it earlier this morning when I was researching questions. It was over the southwest, north of us. And so that's when I developed the question because I didn't know what it was. But it seemed
gotcha.
Like
yeah, if there is something to that, someone chime in, and Bristol will get the first point for stumping the DPE because that is not something that I am familiar with.
Have you seen that before in the past?
Yeah, chime in if that's something you guys are familiar with. So, all right. And you know what? Hold on one sec. I got a friend having some technical difficulties. Unresponsive. Okay. I'm gonna mute that. All right. Any other comments from anyone else on that, Carl?
No, but it's called a frontogenesis.
Is it when it's dissolving? All right. So let's now that I'm stumped, part of the exercise I want to do today with these episodes is to also show you how to look things up. So if we go over, let's see, so many windows open now. So
There you go.
Don't know that I grabbed the, yeah, you're seeing my desktop there, right? Don't think I have the aviation weather book open. So a great place to go. In fact, when we go to training at the FAA, they call this the official search engine of the FAA. And they say it as kind of a joke, but it's true because the, oh, thank you, Carl. He is on it. Well, I don't know if that's an official reference, but here's
It's
what
a
Carl
legend.
just found. Yeah.
Scroll down
So
and you'll find it.
There we go. All right.
There it is.
Frontogenesis. So now I'm going to copy that. So so that's great. It's great to be able to do a quick search. What I was going to show you here on Google is start everything with the letters FAA, because there's a lot of stuff on the internet. As you guys know, not all of it is good. And as a representative of the FAA, as a designee, I do want to encourage everyone to always make sure you're checking your sources. So if I just type in FAA and frontogenesis, let's see what comes up. And here's an FAA resource. I'm going to right click, open a new tab. And this one looks like it's right from aviation weather. I usually do 3 or 4 of these, just checking the domain that it's coming from. So here's one from, oh, this looks like the old weather book, but the weather hasn't changed much. So that's kind of cool. I wonder if I can actually find that word. Here you go. Frontolysis and frontogenesis. An adjacent air mass, let's see, process. So I'm gonna guess based on those words that it has to do with it forming or dissipating, but that is not something that you see very often, that is for sure. When a relatively sharp zone of transition develops over an area between 2 air masses, gradually. All right, there you go. Good job, Bristow. You get the first point for stumping the DPE.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute you so you don't have to worry about background noise. Any related questions on that, Carl?
Bridget's asking, for private pilot purposes for the check ride, how in depth of an understanding do students need to have and be able to explain with weather?
Great question. So one of the goals that I have for this session and all of these sessions is to encourage everyone to really dig into the ACS, the Airman Certification Standards. So I've got the PDF open here. Whether you do it on your computer, in ForeFlight, wherever you look at your documents, just do a search. And well, I'll tell you right now that word frontogenesis is nowhere in the ACS. So that right there tells you you don't really need to know that to be a private pilot. And as far as what to know about weather, if I just type in the word weather, you can see that there's 36 times that word comes up. And as you go through here, some of it's in the introduction. When you really get down into the meat and potatoes of the ACS, we have the areas of operation. And this is a great reference, not just getting ready for a check ride, but really for all private pilots. If you're getting ready for a flight review, if you are getting back into flying, maybe doing a rusty pilot's course, this lets you know the objective, what you need to know, how you need to apply that knowledge for risk management purposes, and then the skills that you need to have that are related to that. And on one hand, it's very specific. On another hand, it doesn't really get into a lot of detail. Like, specifically it says clouds or turbulence. Like, well, what do you need to know about that? And the risk management will get into a little more explanation about what you need to know. And then the skills are what you need to be able to do with what you know. So there's the official answer, Bridget. Carl, I am picking up some background noise from you. Is it easy for you to mute and unmute yourself? Thank you. And so on the check ride, when the examiner does their job the way that they're supposed to, everything's going to be given to you as a scenario. So it's not just tell me what you know about fronts. It's here's a scenario. You're going from point A to point B. Usually it's your home airport to somewhere cross country. And that assignment, that fictitious trip is going to be the topic of most of your ground session and even the first part of your flight on the check ride. So the examiner is simply going to say, show me how you know you're going to be safe today. Show me your flight planning, show me how you're going to get from here to there. And as you go through that basic explanation of going from point A to point B, the examiner will, I shouldn't use the word examiner, even though we're called designated pilot examiners. If you look in the ACS, it's actually, they use the term evaluator. Let me do a quick search to show you. So evaluator comes up 98 times. So I should work on calling them the evaluator. And that's important because this is not just for check rides. This could be, like I said, a proficiency check of some kind. It could be for a flight school that has Part 141 examining authority, where your check ride is actually done with someone that works at the school. So the evaluator, whoever that may be, is just going to put everything in terms of a scenario and have you explain it. So the basics for sure, the more you know beyond that, the better. This actually is a good place to talk. And I'm going to get back to highs and lows, don't worry, in my ocean, my water. Let me share the whiteboard. So if we were sitting in a classroom right now, and Carl, you'll let me know if you don't see that. I would get up on the dry erase board and I would say, when we're talking about, actually, no, I don't want to do that. Let's go this way. Anything that we're going to do with ground knowledge, what we're talking about in aviation, what you need to know, risk management, ground school kind of stuff, is on a spectrum. And on the right side of the spectrum, I'm going to call it practical knowledge. And are you guys seeing what Carl's saying down there? I didn't read it fast enough, Carl. Hold on. Okay, very good. Greg has a question. Thank you. Yeah, that's probably not best to message me that way because it's popping up there. So I don't know of a better idea. Actually, I'm sharing my whiteboard right now, so you probably didn't see that. All right, so on the whiteboard, practical knowledge on the right, and the left side, I bet Carl remembers when I had this talk with him. We're going to call this Whiz. You like that? So it's a spectrum. Way on the left side is total Whiz. Way on the right side is practical knowledge. Well, what's the definition of those? Well, practical knowledge is anything that you need to know or that you should know to do your job as a pilot. Okay? What is your job as a pilot? Aviate, navigate, communicate. Those are your priorities as a pilot. It's also your job description as a pilot. When you can do all of those things the right way at the right time for the right amount of time, then you're being a good pilot. Well, whatever you need to know to aviate, navigate, and communicate within a real life scenario is practical knowledge. Whiz is stuff that might be interesting. It might be fun to know some of it. Most flight schools, if you hang out in the lobby long enough, you're going to hear a lot of Whiz. A lot of flight instructors focus on it more than others. So what are some examples? I think we have one with the frontogenesis. I think that's kind of Whiz. Is that something that pilots should know? Well, it's in the FAA Aviation Weather Advisory Circular. So the FAA apparently thinks it's good to know. Does it hurt to know it? No. Is it something you need to know to do your job as a pilot and aviate, navigate, and communicate? Not really. So I would put frontogenesis in the Whiz category. And I won't take back your point, Bristow, but this has me thinking if we are going to come up with some ground rules for this as a game show, I should probably have the ability to decide whether something's practical knowledge or Whiz, because I guarantee if I unmuted the line right now, any one of you could ask me a question that's Whiz that I do not know the answer to. And that's not the point of this get together. We don't want to just spend all of our time over in the Whiz. So that is something I will refer to as we go here and try to keep it over on the practical knowledge side of things. So with that, I'm going to unmute Greg. And Greg, go ahead and chime in while I'm getting back to my other.
Hey, so this is just relative to back to Bridget's question about weather. Am I still?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, cool. I always recommend the best thing you could do is to look at the weather progressing every day. So if you're lucky enough to have an actual weather broadcaster on your local TV station, a meteorologist who actually shows the position of the fronts and tells you what's going to happen and shows you the radar picture and the prog charts, that's ideal. But otherwise, if you just get up every morning and look at the prog charts for the next week, and then so you see that progression day to day, you begin to get an understanding of what it means if there's a cold front coming, what it means if there's a low coming, what the weather patterns are. So I always encourage people when they're just starting, if you look at the weather every day on a weather map and then correlate it to the real weather that's happening, you'll really begin to get the big picture that you want. And sometimes you're going to find as a pilot that you'll actually be right when the forecasters are wrong, because you've learned what happens in your particular area when there's a high that's north of you or something like that.
Love it. Good stuff. Thank you. Appreciate that. So I'm going to share my desktop again. And so you should be seeing that weather surface analysis chart we were looking at. All right. So going along with that, as you look at those charts each day, the surface analysis is a great one to start with. If you do it the way I did here on aviationweather.gov, you can just hit these forward arrows and actually go through the forecast. And it's kind of fun to play it as a timeline and see what's happening with this low and this occluded front that's starting. But back on the surface analysis, I want to start by focusing on these highs and lows. Every ground school that I've been able to find, whether online, in person, videos, whatever, textbooks, the official FAA weather resources, it's difficult to find a good explanation of highs and lows. And so this is where I'm going to go off script a little bit and just talk from Jim Pittman's opinion and perspective of what I think and what I have found is an effective way to think of highs and lows. If you read things like the oral exam guide or most textbook, it'll tell you which way they rotate and whether the air is rising or descending. What I like to focus on is asking the question, why? Why is a great question, because not only does it help you figure out whether you know what's really happening, but it helps you remember the facts. It's one thing to say that air around a low pressure system in the northern hemisphere goes inward, counterclockwise, and upward. Why is the next question. Why does air around a low go inward, upward, and counterclockwise? Back to the picture of the ocean. Imagine this is a relatively calm day out on the ocean. Imagine you're sitting out there in your yacht. I don't know, Greg, what kind, maybe a 40-foot yacht? You think that's good enough for all of us? All right, maybe we're in a sailboat. And you're just kind of looking, and the wind's not really blowing. It's a calm day. But imagine what this would look like as you carefully look at the water. They're not really waves, so we're just going to call it the water, the fluid, is gradually shifting around every few seconds. So if I zoom in here, right here looks like at the moment this photo was taken, there's a pile of water right here, and there's a depression of water right here at that particular moment. A few seconds later, it's going to move, right? And everything will be different in a few seconds. Well, the atmosphere around planet Earth is a fluid. Of course, it's much less dense than water, but it is a fluid. And if you imagine a side view of the atmosphere, it's exactly the same. In fact, I think I got a link over here. You could do this with a sectional chart, but I went ahead and grabbed a hiking map. So we call this a topographical chart. When you look at a chart, just as a comparison here, so pause the weather thing for a second. We're going to go on a little tangent here. And the lines represent lines of equal elevation. And when the lines are close together, that means that there's a cliff, right? And we have the same thing. I think I might have grabbed, yeah, I do have a sectional chart here. It's not quite as easy to see because there's so much else going on, but down here in the bottom right corner, you can see these lines of equal elevation. Well, the same thing happens on a weather chart, like a surface analysis chart. Now imagine you're looking at the ocean from a top view. To make the comparison, I think you guys can see where I'm going with this. The H's, or the high pressure systems, represent a pile of fluid. Comparing it to the ocean, we're saying that'd be like a pile of water. And then the low would be where it's down and it's a depression. So the, so pause that for a second. We also need to talk about Coriolis force, just briefly. Because the Earth rotates, causes something that's referred to as Coriolis force or Coriolis effect. I do have on my to-do list, let me just find this. This is not FAA official, but I just remembered this. Let me see if I can find it real quick. One of the things that I do for Greg's group is we have a list of recommended videos. And I found these videos that are for, that explain Coriolis force. Yeah, here we go. It's actually kind of cool what they did. It's a two-part series, or not series, but hello, Destin. Okay, so, hey, nice shot. If you just go look for the truth about toilet swirl, you're gonna find, this is on Smarter Every Day, not an official FAA reference, but what he did, there's this video, and then, let me pause it. His friend did this video. So they have the truth about toilet swirl, Southern Hemisphere and Northern Hemisphere. And they did it where you'll actually sync up the videos at the same time and they take turns talking. So you got to do it with like one video on your computer and one video on your iPad, or if you can run both videos on your computer at the same time, and you'll sync them up. And these guys actually, between the United States and I think he's in Australia, go through and explain Coriolis in a really cool way. So quick side note there, there's your explanation. So all you need to know as a pilot is that in the Northern Hemisphere, air turns to its right. That's what you want to remember. When the air is moving, it gets deflected to the right, whatever way it's going, it'll be its right in the Northern Hemisphere. And I think I did the setting where you're not seeing the mirror image of me. So hopefully right is right and left is left. But okay, so back to our discussion here. Let's compare the waves in the ocean. Well, like I said, in the ocean, the water is going to move every few seconds. The same thing, quite literally, the same thing happens with our atmosphere, except instead of taking a few seconds, it takes a few days. So imagine looking at the ocean and slowing it way down. So as the water moves back and forth, and it's really just gravity that's pulling it down, and the other water and wind and everything. Same for the atmosphere. There's all these different factors that make it move. Imagine it takes several days for it to move. Now we talk about the air. Everywhere there's an H is a pile of air at the moment that this picture was taken. It's a surface analysis. It was taken at a certain time in the past. You got to check the effective time. But even when you go to the forecast and start looking at the projects, this is a guess in the future of where the highs and lows will be. And then you look at the isobars, which are the gray lines connecting equal pressures, and that's where I like to make the comparison to that hiking chart, or the lines of equal elevation on the sectional chart. Those are like the isobars on the weather chart. What does it mean when they're far apart? Just like looking at a hiking chart, it means that the ground is pretty level. What does it mean when they're close together? It means that we have a steep pressure gradient, which sounds really fancy, but compare it to a hiking chart. If you had a whole bunch of lines close together on the hiking chart, it would mean you're standing on the edge of a cliff, or you're looking at the edge of a mountain that goes up sharply, depending on which way it goes. And here we're saying that the pressure, or the edge of the wave, like if I find one, I don't know, we can say like right here, this dark part in the bottom left of my screen. If we said that this is a very steep little pile of water, we would say that the gradient is steep. Well, when you look at the weather chart and you see this low pressure system here, in your mind, imagine the highs are up and the lows are down, and where the isobars are close together, the gradient is steep. Well, what does that mean? It means the air wants to quickly move downhill from the high to the low. Well, if air comes in, let's see, I think I can annotate this. Not something I usually do. Let's try that. What color should I use? I'm just going to try something that's not on the chart. I don't know, pink. Let's try this this green color. All right, so imagine the air comes out of the high. I'm going to play with this high over here. The air comes out of the high. I need a thicker line than that. Here we go. And what did we say Coriolis does? You come out of the high and you turn to your right. You come out of the high and turn to the right. No matter which way the air is going, and there'll be other reasons that the air blows certain directions in certain parts of the world, but do you guys see how this thing is turning to the right? All of the wind is turning to its right. So that means that this is going to go clockwise in the northern hemisphere because of Coriolis. Well, if you've got this pile of air, just like a pile of water, it wants to go down because of gravity. So the air will be descending at the center of the high. It'll be going out and clockwise in the northern hemisphere. The air coming into the low, one of my pet peeves, in fact, I think I found one, an example. Instead of drawing, I should probably just pull this up. Let's see, go back. Here we go, bad example. All right, most textbooks, oh, it still has my annotations. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, how do I get back to that? There we go. All right, clear drawings. So I like the explanation of the high, and I don't know who I stole this to. I just did a Google search, who I got this from. But notice that on the low, they show the arrows coming in and bending to their left. I do not like that. I don't think that that's accurate. A better example, and it was harder to find the example like this, is this one, where the air comes into the low and goes to its right. It goes in to its right. So each arrow, no matter which way the air is going to its right. And I think it gets confusing. No, I'm not annotating. Go away. Give me my mouse back. I think it's confusing, even though this one shows counterclockwise, I think it's confusing to have the arrows bending to the left. So again, be careful what you're using as a reference. But do you guys see that, how the air comes into the low and it goes to its right? So this one would go counterclockwise. Well, once all that air comes in to the low, where's it going to go when it gets to the middle? It has nowhere to go but up. So at the center of the low, we have rising air going counterclockwise, and it came inward. So inward, upward, counterclockwise. There's a very basic understanding of why high and low pressure systems rotate the way they do in the northern hemisphere. When you understand why, I hope you agree, that makes it a lot easier to remember the what, to remember the facts of which way. You don't just memorize a list, but you can remember the facts. All right, probably getting a little long-winded on that. How are we doing, Carl?
Doing okay. No questions coming in yet. So
no questions.
I
thought you guys were.
Ones.
Man, when I saw you guys sign up, I thought you were just gonna have a whole list for me. I go stump that Pittman character.
We had a couple people join when we got started. So if you guys have questions, go ahead and make sure you open up the group chat and throw them into there, and we'll get them over to Jim.
Thank you for keeping an eye on that. All right. So let's see. I think you're still seeing my screen, or are you seeing the whiteboard? What are we seeing?
Your screen.
I'm going to stop that. Okay, very good. So let's, now we see Carl. Is that just because you were talking or because you're pinned? That's okay. All right, what else would be good to talk about? Let me go back here. Well, if you guys don't have a lot of questions, this might end up being shorter than we expected.
Let's have some fun questions here. So I'll go ahead and ask you one. There are some people in here, I'm assuming they're getting ready for their check ride, and they wanted to ask a DPE a couple of questions. So let's say you're in your check ride. DPE asks you a question, and you legitimately don't know the answer. Is I don't know an acceptable answer?
It's not an acceptable answer, but the fact that you don't necessarily know it is acceptable. Let me explain what I mean by that. first I need to find what happened to my meeting controls. Here we go. All right, let me share. Got so many windows open. This is good exercise in CRM. All right, so you're seeing my desktop with the ACS again?
Yes.
All right, we'll just leave it here on weather. It's a good example for what we're talking about. So again, the checkride should be scenario based. And whatever the question is that you don't know the answer to is going to be part of that scenario. So for example, we got fog down here. Let's say that the examiner is looking at your flight planning. Maybe the way it would come up is, well, you know, thank you for showing me the current weather and the forecast. I see here that the temperature and dew point are close to each other. Or they might just point at the METAR and say, what does it mean when these two numbers are close to each other, where you've got the temperature and dew point? And you say, well, that means that there's probably going to be rain or low clouds, maybe even fog. The examiners say, okay, good. Do you know all the different types of fog? So there's the question, and that's where you're like, oh man, yeah, I totally remember that my instructor told me that I should go read those, but I just, you know, I know what fog is, but I couldn't tell you the 5 types. So for the scenario, and this is a private pilot we're talking about, and there is room for the examiner to use their judgment throughout the entire check ride. But talking about this one specific question, what I would do as the DPE is look at it like, okay, well, the applicant knows how to read the METAR and TAF. They understand that when those two numbers are close to each other, they're being careful for some kind of low clouds or ground fog. I am hearing you breathe again, Carl. And the maybe my earbuds are just too good. I don't know. Or your microphone, that's what it is. You got that fancy microphone. Anyway, does the fact that the applicant doesn't know the 5 different types of fog, does that really matter on a practical knowledge spectrum? You know, going back to our Whiz versus practical knowledge, I think it's good when an applicant knows the 5 types of fog. I think it shows that they're digging into their ground school. They're understanding that fog can form in multiple different ways. That's more of the practical side of knowing. The fact that you know how to rattle off all 5 types is less important. So that's probably what I would do if the applicant said, I really don't remember 5 types. I just know that fog is fog. I'd say, well, tell me about some different situations where fog might form. And then if the applicant's like, well, I imagine if it was like a clear, cool night, you know, not much wind, there might be fog kind of down in a valley. Like, oh, okay. You know, I'm thinking they know how radiation fog forms. Or they're thinking, oh, well, if there's a little breeze that blows the relatively warmer, moist air from the ocean over the land and you get fog on the land, like, okay, they understand how advection fog forms. So, you know, again, practical. You know, we call these check rides. That's a nickname. Hopefully you guys know the official name is practical test. And there's a reason the FAA calls it a practical test. We're testing your practical knowledge. Do you know what you need to know to go out there and aviate, navigate, and communicate? So does that answer the question, Carl?
Yes, it does. All right. Next question comes from Dave. So if you're a student pilot and you're flying over the clouds, is it required that you maintain view of the ground?
So the answer is no. Now I got to find a reference. That is a regulation question. So, and actually, are you able to unmute people yourself, Carl, or am I the only one that can do that?
Yeah, you'd have to make me a host.
Let me see if I can do that real quick. Because I think it'd be fun to hear from the other people. Say hi to Dave. All right, that's not the right window. Got my desktop over there. There they go. All right, so if I go to here.
And also, we can tell who has a working microphone and who doesn't. So.
Oh, okay, very good. Hey, Dorothy made it. Hi, Dorothy. Glad you're here. All right, a bunch of people made it. Steve, are you Rodney's brother? If so, hello. Let's see. If I go to Carl here. Thank you for your patience, everyone. All right, Carl. You should now be the host. So is that Dave Steiner that had a question? I'm here on the
Yes, it
participants,
was.
So, okay, it appears you should be able to unmute Dave now. Go ahead and unmute him so we can say hi while I'm looking for a reference here.
All right, he's unmuted. Let's see if it works.
You there, Dave? Maybe he doesn't have a microphone, which is okay. All right, so thank you for typing in the question. So official references, that's one of the things we're going for today. ecfr.gov is one of the great places, probably the most official place you can get regulations on the internet. And they're updated constantly. You know, it's important to know that if you have a printed copy of the regs, that's great, but it does go out of date pretty much as soon as it's printed. So if you got to watch updates and things. But for most of the stuff we're dealing with in general aviation, if you have one that was printed in the last year, you're going to be okay. So here we are at the Code of Federal Regulations. Title 14 is where all of our aviation stuff is. And then we have all the different part numbers. Two of the main parts that you use in general aviation are part 61 or 91. I remember when I was a student pilot, even a new private pilot, I always used to get those mixed up of which was which. There's a few little memory aids out there. For me, silly things are the easiest way to remember. So 61 being the lower number, I think of that as stuff we do on the ground, namely certification, paperwork. So requirements to become a pilot, to become a flight instructor, all of the stuff we would be studying and learning. It does involve flight training, but when we're talking about the rules, we're talking about what we're doing on the ground, getting ready, that kind of stuff. And then the number up high is part 91, and that has more to do with the rules that we follow when we're flying, general operating and flight rules. So the question is, as a private pilot, I think you said non-instrument rated, that would be implied if he didn't say it. Is it required to keep the ground in view when you're over the top of the clouds, or is that legal? And anytime you're going to ask a question of, is it legal? Well, let me clarify. We're going to Jim Pittman's opinion now, okay? This is my opinion and recommendation of how I think you should think about these kinds of questions. And then I'll answer your question. We'll see if we can find it. So if, as a pilot, if you say, I wonder if that's legal, that should be a big red flag right out of the gate, okay? And Dave, you probably already know the answer to this one. You just know it's a great question, so we'll answer it. But the other thing you gotta think about is, even when something is technically legal, it doesn't mean that it's safe, doesn't mean that it's prudent, doesn't mean it's a good idea. And you always have to wonder or ask yourself, if something were to go wrong, maybe something totally unrelated to the specific question that I have, and there's an accident or an incident, even if nobody gets hurt, but there's an investigation of some kind, or heaven forbid someone does get hurt and it even goes to a civil court where you have attorneys and a jury of peers, quote unquote, that know nothing about aviation, right? Then you have to ask yourself, how is this going to sound in court? So one of the first things to think about is the rule that has to do with careless or reckless. So little tip for you guys, I'm just here on a Chrome browser, and like most browsers on a Windows computer, it's Control F as in Foxtrot, pops open this little search window. If you're on a Mac, I believe it's just Command F will do the same thing. And I knew there was something about being careless and reckless, and there it is right there. 9113 basically says, thou shalt never do anything careless or reckless. Well, how do you know if it's careless or reckless? Well, usually it's one of those things that nobody's going to care unless there's a problem. If there's a problem, then clearly it was careless or reckless because it caused a problem, or at least that's what the lawyers will try to prove. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is we just always need to be above reproach, whether something is technically legal or not. As far as maintaining reference with the ground, the one that does come to mind is a limitation for student pilots that specifically says they do have to keep reference to the ground. It has been so many years since I looked that up. Because it is a limitation on student pilots, it's got to be in Part 61. And you haven't stumped me yet, if I can find it. But that is not one that I have memorized. And remembering exactly where every reg is not a requirement to be a pilot or even a flight instructor, though when you're doing it day in and day out, working with the same kind of people, it is handy to remember some of these regs. So I'm just gonna go down to student pilot. So again, I just went Control F, started typing in student. Here's subpart C and part 61. And we're looking for limitations. Why am I not seeing limitations right there? I thought that's what they called it. General limitations, right in front of me. All right. So Carl, if you see it before me, unmute yourself, but somewhere in here, what is the word? Nah, that got me off. Sorry. Back. I want to find where it talks about maintaining reference to the ground. Ground training. It may be where they talk about the cross. Oh, here we go. To the surface. It's right there where I look for reference, isn't it? All right. So general limitations. A student pilot may not act as pilot in command in an aircraft. And then there's this list of things. Number 7, when the flight cannot be made with visual reference to the surface. So then the question is, does that apply to a private pilot? Now that I've got the verbiage, I'm going to copy visual reference to the surface. And right now I've got a lot of part 61 open. So if I search that whole part of part 61, it shows up 3 times. And I'm guessing it's going to be, hold on, 89. So this is subpart, solo requirements. Okay, so this is talking about student pilots. And then number 2 is also, that's recreational pilots, okay? And then number 3 is sport pilot. So it isn't listed as a limitation for sport, recreation, and student, and does not come up. Those are the only 3 places you see that phrase. So I'm confident does not apply to a private pilot. It's not listed as a limitation. To be sure, or to be familiar with what your limitations are as a private pilot, all the way back to the top, part 61, and right here, subpart E, or if I even just right here, limitations, right there. Nope, balloon rating. Eligibility requirements general. Oh, I thought there was a section for limitations right here. Private pilot privileges and limitations. So this is where it talks about private pilot. No, up a little more. That's not it. Where am I lost here? Cross country, aeronautical knowledge. All right, am I remembering that wrong? I thought we had limitations listed for each of these. So if someone has the answer to private pilot limitations, so let's go to our friend Google, FAA private pilot limitations. Just put it right into Google. And not an official FAA reference, but sometimes these other people will have references to official FAA sources. But I like to just look and see if I can find, so their student pilot. I guess it's really just the privileges. So that's private pilot privileges and limitations, pilot and command, 113. All right, 61, 113 is what you want. That's where it's going to tell you about your privileges and limitations. So why did we not see that when we were looking here? Because this only because we're in, this is just talking about certification, this menu that I'm in. But if you, there you go. So there's an example when Google helps, just back out to Google. Remember to start the search with FAA, and then what you're looking for, find a link. Usually it's right there on the first page. And 61-113, another one that I did not have memorized. It's been a long time since I was regularly doing private pilot training. So there you go. Next question. What do we got, Carl?
I'm terrible with names, but Anita has a question for you. Yes,
let's see,
I'm going to unmute her.
Is her mic working? Yeah.
Let's see.
Hi, Anita. We can hear you. Where are you calling in from? Are you there, Anita? Maybe not. Oh,
Oh,
no,
she
she
went
doesn't want to
ahead.
talk to us. That's okay. She's like, oh no, I didn't know I was going to have to talk. All right. Did she type her question? Go ahead and read it.
Yeah,
for us.
she did. She said, can you give us a real life scenario of when a timed approach would be used?
A timed approach. Okay. So that sounds like an instrument scenario.
And she's at work, so.
Oh, okay. All right. No worries, Anita. Sorry to put you on the spot there. So a timed approach, and I'm fine covering a wide variety of topics here. You know, if the feedback is good on this, we may do specific episodes in the future where we focus on, you know, VFR, private pilot, or instrument, that kind of thing. But yeah, let's go ahead and tackle that. A timed approach. So a local example. And those of you that are not instrument rated, you can still hang on for the ride. This will be good stuff. If I was on my iPad, I would just go to ForeFlight, but to share with you easily on, actually, you know what? Why not? Most of you are using ForeFlight. We're going to try this because we can. I'm going to share my iPad. All right. If I did it on the computer, I was just going to go to skyvector.com. They make it easy to pick an airport and pull up some instrument approach plates and show them on the computer. So, oh, you know what? Apparently I've never done this on this computer. It wants to synchronize real quick. Yeah, technology. Hi, Carl. You're looking good in your Mustang there. All right, bear with me, guys. Let's see. While it's thinking, I'm going to get my plate ready here in ForeFlight. So if you want to follow along with me, I'm going to go to Casa Grande. A lot of the instrument check rides I do, usually we have to go down there to shoot the ILS approach. And so I know that the VOR approach to runway 5 at Casa, good one. Are you still with me, Carl? You guys froze. I hope that this is.
You froze momentarily. You're back.
Okay. Yeah. I might not be able to share my screen. It looks like it's installing a plugin, which I don't know why that's taking so long. All right. So I've got the approach plate here on my iPad. We'll just do this the old-fashioned way with the camera. So if you're using ForeFlight, you've got the VOR runway 5 approach at Casa Grande. That's Charlie Golf Zulu. And down here in the corner, there's information about how much time it should take to go from the final approach fix to the missed approach point. And Anita's question is a very good one, which is, why do we care about that? In real life, when would we ever need to do that? And yeah, it says not responding. Am I frozen again? Are you still hearing me?
We're still hearing you.
All right, I'm just going to leave that alone and hope it doesn't mess things up. So the reason that's a good question is nowadays we have GPS. Most people have GPS, especially with WAS, makes it very accurate. It's easy to identify where you are every second of the way. And there are waypoints to help you figure out where you are. So why would you have to time the approach? And the answer is that certain approaches are built for people who do not have all that fancy equipment. Or if the scenario is the GPS is not working, or a certain nav aid that is used for that approach is not working, the FAA wants you to still have the ability to safely do the approach and land, safe and legal. So some approaches allow for timed approaches, other approaches do not. In real life, the answer to your question is you would need to do it when there's no other way to identify the missed approach point. If time is the only way to do it, you would have to time it. More commonly, where you're going to see that would be in a check ride scenario, doing your instrument check ride or a multi-engine check ride or something where you're flying an instrument approach, and the evaluator gives you a scenario that requires you to time it. Using the example here of the VOR approach to runway 5 at Casa Grande, the VOR, Stanfield VOR, is the, I don't know how well you can see that, just so it's on the recording, but you guys can go look it up. That is the initial approach fix and the final approach fix. And then the only way to identify the missed approach point, or the ways, plural, is with DME or GPS, which counts for DME, or using time. Well, most of the airplanes that I'm doing check rides in, they don't have real DME, meaning, you know, the old school thing where the airplane sends out a signal, it comes back, figures out the math. That's DME. Very few new airplanes have DME these days. Instead, we have IFR approved GPS, which counts in lieu of DME. And the scenario can be something as simple as you're on your way to Casa Grande, IMC, instrument meteorological conditions, and there's a NOTAM for GPS jamming in the area. Might affect you, it might not. 10 minutes out from your destination, you get messages on your GPS that it's not working anymore. What are you gonna do? And in most airplanes, once that GPS goes away, most of the airplanes I'm doing check rides in, modern flight training airplanes, once that GPS goes away, there is no more DME. There's no more distance measuring equipment, DME information. And the only approach that you can do at Casa Grande is the VOR to runway 5. Even the ILS says DME required. So as soon as that goes away, there's a real life scenario where you'd have to time the approach. I think it's a good habit, and a lot of flight instructors teach that you should always time it from the final approach fix, just so that if you ever do need it, you've got that good habit to start the clock at the final approach fix. Anyway, so there you go. There's the answers if you can't identify the nav aid. So kind of a long answer, but there you go. And you are all frozen, Carl. I'm afraid. I don't want to tell it to close because I'm afraid. Yeah, I'm afraid. I'm afraid it's going to close you guys all out if I do that. So I'm just going to leave that alone. But yeah, you're frozen. Am I frozen?
You're moving for me, so.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully everyone else can see and hear me okay. All right, guys. So we're at the 1 hour mark. Thank you for participating. I expected more questions, but hey, this was still fun. Any other questions to answer, Carl?
I'm not seeing any other questions or anything, just a lot of recommendations for each other, everyone helping each other out. So I think that's it.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and call it a session. And thank you again for joining us. This was the first episode of Stump the DPE. I do feel like I got stumped a couple times, but hopefully part of what everyone was able to gain from this is how to look up official FAA resources. I encourage you to always consider the difference between practical knowledge and Whiz and where something may fall on that line. If you can find a real life scenario where knowing it helps you do your job as a pilot, or an accident report where if someone would have known something, it would have helped prevent that accident, that makes it practical. Okay, practical knowledge is what we want to focus on. It's okay to throw in some Whiz. I like to say that Whiz is like cheese whiz. A little's okay, but you don't want too much. So try to keep it on the practical side and stick with official FAA references. Of course, for anyone watching this, this is focused on flight training and pilots in the United States. So we're doing FAA sources and resources. And don't be afraid to not know things because we don't know what we don't know. So keep studying, keep learning, and keep helping others to also study and learn. We all have a great opportunity right now with this physical distancing. I'm not a fan of the term social distancing. I think we could still be very social using technology like we are here. So I don't want to distance myself socially, but physical distancing is real important right now. And we all have an opportunity to increase our knowledge in aviation and flight training. So let's take advantage of this opportunity. Let's study more than we ever have before. Let's learn more and focus on what's practical. And I think that we'll be in a good place. So with that, thank you for attending and participating. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Take care.